In 79 AD, Julia Felix ran a commercial real estate empire in Pompeii, public baths, street-level retail, luxury apartments. She collected rents, managed tenants, funded improvements for yield. Women like her weren't just participants in Roman property markets. They were builders of wealth. So why do women today own just 2% of commercial real estate? This is The Real Estate Historian, where property, power, and history collide. Every market has a blueprint. I'll show you who drew it. In 27 BC, a Roman emperor wrote a law that would erase this forever. The Lex Voconia made female property rights conditional on childbirth. Your uterus became the key to your safe deposit box. Today, women in America own 32 cents for every dollar of wealth owned by men. In commercial real estate, the sector Julia Felix dominated, women hold just 2% of ownership positions. The law was written in 27 BC. It's still working today. To understand how one law could echo for 2,000 years, we need to go back to ancient Rome. In 27 BC, Octavian, now calling himself Augustus, had won the civil wars and emerged as sole ruler of the Roman world. His regime was built on a promise, the restoration of the mos maiorum, the ancestral customs. Central to that vision was the familia, the Roman household, ruled absolutely by the paterfamilias, the male head who held power over property, slaves, wives, and children. But Augustus had a problem. Rome's aristocracy was shrinking. Decades of bloody war and a cultural shift toward celibacy among the elite threatened the state's stability. The ruling class was refusing to marry, refusing to have children. Augustus didn't see this as a personal choice. He saw it as treason against the continuity of Rome. So in 18 BC, he deployed the full weight of Roman law to weaponize property inheritance. The result was the Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus. 9 years later came the Lex Voconia, the law that would change everything. These weren't suggestions. They were economic sanctions. Unmarried men and women were banned from receiving inheritances. Childless married couples could receive only half of what was left to them. Young widows were legally compelled to remarry within a set period or forfeit their rights to inherit. Your bedroom became the business of the state. Your fertility became the price of your property. But the most sophisticated mechanism Augustus created was the ius trium liberorum, the right of 3 children. Under traditional Roman law, women lived under tutela mulierum, perpetual guardianship. A woman, no matter her age, required the formal approval of a male guardian to sell land, free a slave, or write a will. She was a legal minor from cradle to grave. The Lex Voconia offered a deal. A freeborn woman who bore 3 children, or a freed woman who bore 4, was released from guardianship. She could manage her own affairs. Your uterus became the key to your safe deposit box. This created 2 classes of female ownership: the procreative owner, whose legal capacity was biologically determined, and the mediated owner, who might inherit wealth from her father, but could not wield it. She had access to the property. She could live in the villa, collect the rents, but ownership rights, the power to sell or leverage, remained with the guardian structure. It's like being handed the keys to a car you're not allowed to drive. This was the birth of a template, access without ownership. A woman could occupy property, even manage it, but true dominion was always conditional, always mediated, always revocable. And that template didn't die with Rome. The archaeological record of Pompeii reveals how this system worked in practice. Women were active players in the real estate market, constantly navigating the constraints Augustus had built. Let's start with Julia Felix. In 62 AD, a devastating earthquake shattered Pompeii's infrastructure. While the city struggled to rebuild, Julia Felix saw opportunity. She owned a massive estate in the southeast corner of the city. She converted her private villa into a commercial complex, public baths, shops along the street front, apartments on the upper floors. Her rental notice, preserved in red paint on the building's facade, still exists. The Corpus Inscriptionum Latinarum catalogued it as CIL 4 1136, in the property of Julia Felix, daughter of Spurius, elegant baths for respectable people, shops, pergolas, and upper-story apartments are offered for rent from the Ides of August. Julia Felix was running a commercial real estate empire, collecting rents, managing tenants, funding improvements for yield. But look at that inscription. Daughter of Spurius. Spurius wasn't a name. It was a legal designation. It meant illegitimate. Paradoxically, this may have given her freedom. Without a prominent paterfamilias to control her, and perhaps operating in the legal gray zones of a city in crisis, she functioned as an independent operator. She had access, she had control, but her status, marked by illegitimacy, was the exception that proved the rule. Now consider Eumachia. Eumachia was a public priestess, and the patron of Pompey's powerful Fullers' Guild, the clothmakers. She funded the construction of the Eumachia building, the largest structure in the Pompeian Forum, and dedicated it to Concordia and Augustan piety. Her inscription CIL X 810 is a masterclass in navigating the system. Eumachia, daughter of Lucius, public priestess, in her own name and that of her son, Marcus Numistrius Fronto, built at her own expense the Chalcidicum, crypt, and portico. In her own name and that of her son. Why include him? Scholars argue it was to advance his political career, but it also reflects the legal reality of property transmission under Augustus's laws. Eumachia's wealth, derived from her father's brick business and her husband's wool interests, was funneled into a monument that served the imperial order. She had the money, but the building served the state and her son. Her wealth was legitimate only when framed as maternal devotion. And then there's Caecilia Metella. Her tomb dominates the Via Appia just outside Rome. It's a massive, fortress-like mausoleum that still stands today. The inscription is brief: to Caecilia Metella, daughter of Quintus Creticus, wife of Crassus. Daughter of, wife of. She's defined entirely by the men in her life. The tomb is a statement of the Crassus family's power, one of the richest dynasties in Rome, using her body as the focal point. Caecilia Metella represents the passive asset, wealth held in a woman's name to cement alliances but never controlled by her. 3 women, 3 strategies. Julia Felix operated in the margins. Eumachia legitimized through motherhood. Caecilia Metella existed as a vessel for male dynastic power. The pattern, access, yes, management sometimes. But ownership, true, unconditional ownership, was always filtered through the system Augustus built. And that system was about to go global. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, the laws scattered. But in the 6th century, Emperor Justinian codified everything Rome had learned about power and property into the Corpus Juris Civilis. This wasn't just a legal text, it was Roman civilization in written form, and it preserved Augustus's template. The idea that female capital is dangerous and requires regulation, either by a husband, a guardian, or the state. When legal scholars in 11th century Bologna rediscovered Justinian's code, they didn't see it as history. They saw it as ratio scripta, written reason, superior law, applicable everywhere. And that's how a Roman law from 18 BC crossed 1,000 years and ended up in medieval England, calcified into the doctrine of coverture. But here's the deeper truth. Coverture perfected what Augustus started. The English jurist Henry de Bracton, writing in the 13th century and drawing from Roman law, articulated the principle. But it was William Blackstone, in 1765, who gave it its clearest expression. By marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, The very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage. Civil death, not guardianship, erasure. The Roman model said women needed oversight. Coverture said they didn't exist. A married woman couldn't sign a contract, couldn't own property separately from her husband, couldn't keep her own wages. If she owned land before marriage, the husband controlled all rents and profits from it during the marriage. She held title. He held the money, access without ownership, inverted. The United States imported this wholesale. Colonial America, built on English common law, adopted coverture without modification. For most of American history, a married woman, a feme covert, was legally assetless. Even after states began passing Married Women's Property Acts in the mid-19th century, the structure persisted. And here's the deeper truth. These acts weren't passed to liberate women. Legal historians note they were often designed to protect family assets from a husband's creditors. If a husband went bankrupt, the wife's separate property couldn't be seized. Female ownership was restored to preserve male dynastic wealth. Which brings us to 1972. Carol Lewick was a magazine editor in Arlington, Virginia. She earned $11,000 a year. When she and her husband Martin applied for a mortgage, the loan officer at Floyd E. Davis Mortgage Corporation told them her income wouldn't be counted. Unless they could guarantee she wouldn't get pregnant. The officer gave them 3 options: birth control, an abortion, or a vasectomy, her reproductive system, in exchange for capital. Lewick submitted a letter from her gynecologist to get the house. Then they filed a federal complaint. Their story made the front page of the Washington Post in February 1973. They weren't alone. Marjorie Winchin testified that a lender agreed to count her income only if she provided a medical certificate proving she had been sterilized, proof of a hysterectomy or tubal ligation. Let that sit for a moment. Rome, 9 A.D. You must bear 3 children to gain property rights. The Ius Trium Liberorum. America, 1974. You must have 0 children to gain property rights. The baby letter, the numbers inverted, the principle identical. In both systems, the state or the market viewed female reproductive capacity as a liability to be regulated before property access could be granted. On October 28, 1974, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was signed into law. Discrimination based on sex or marital status was banned. The baby letter era ended. But 50 years later, the data reveals something unsettling. The access was granted. The ownership in terms of wealth equivalence remains elusive. When we say women have equal property rights today, that's only half true. Access, yes, women can get mortgages. They can buy homes. In fact, single women now own 58% of homes purchased by unmarried Americans. That's the headline. That's what looks like progress. But ownership, true wealth ownership, tells a different story. Women own 32 cents for every dollar of wealth owned by men. And when you break that down by asset class, the picture sharpens. Residential real estate, where single women dominate, they pay approximately 2% more when buying a home and sell for 2% less than single men. That's a $1,600 annual loss in equity. It's been called the pink tax on housing. Women have access to home ownership, but the market extracts a premium for their participation. Commercial real estate, where the real dynastic wealth is built. Women hold 2% of ownership positions. 2%. Not 20, not 12. 2. This isn't about individual choices. This is structural. Look at who works in real estate versus who owns it. 66% of real estate agents in America are women, but 78% of investment properties are owned by men. Women are the labor, Men are the capital. And here's where Augustus's template is still visible. Women have been granted access to the industry. They can show homes, negotiate deals, facilitate transactions. But the wealth-generating engines, the commercial buildings, the apartment complexes, the office towers, remain a modern forum where women are still largely spectators. The legal barriers came down in 1974, but the accumulated deficit remains. Men have been on the wealth escalator, compounding interest, property appreciation, leveraging equity into more equity, since Augustus. 2,000 years of compounding advantage. Women were barred from the escalator until 50 years ago. And even now, the debt anchor, student loans, caregiving responsibilities, wage gaps, prevents the same rate of climb. For women of color, the numbers collapse entirely. Black and Latina women own less than 1 penny for every dollar of wealth owned by white men. This is the legacy of redlining, a racialized form of access denial, compounding with the legacy of coverture. The laws changed, the architecture hasn't. Julia Felix managed a commercial real estate empire in 79 AD, but she needed illegitimacy to escape guardianship. In 1974, American women needed to sign away their fertility to escape the baby letter. Today, they can buy homes. But commercial real estate, the sector where wealth compounds across generations, remains 2% female ownership. Augustus wasn't trying to oppress women. He was solving a demographic crisis. But the law he wrote in 27 BC, making female wealth conditional on state interests, didn't just survive empires. It erased women from the ownership class. The deed to every property in the West still carries that erasure. If this changed how you see property rights, subscribe. Every market has a blueprint. I'll show you who drew it.